A boy faces his fear to save a tiger trapped in a forest snare, but hunters create a new threat, and the ending was surprising. Before watching this true story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to attract 10 years of good luck. In the small town of Green Hills, nestled between the lush mountains of upstate New York, Michael was known as the boy who always carried a sketchbook under his arm. At 14, he preferred the company of trees and the sound of birds to the chatter of the town's only square. His house was on the last street of the village, right on the edge of the dense forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. That Saturday morning, the sky was particularly blue, and Michael woke up with a restless heart. There was something different in the air, a kind of silent call coming from the forest. After having breakfast with his parents, Anna and Robert, owners of the town's small market, he grabbed his backpack with water, some fruit, and his inseparable sketchbook. "Son, don't go too far today," Anna warned, adjusting the collar of his shirt. "They say strange footprints have been appearing near the creek." Michael nodded, but his eyes shone with that curiosity his mother knew so well. Robert, who was organizing the market shelves, smiled discreetly. He knew his son had inherited his adventurous spirit, the same one that had brought him to Green Hills 15 years ago, when he decided to leave the city to live closer to nature. The boy followed the trail he knew like the back of his hand. It was his secret refuge, where he spent hours drawing different species of birds and plants he encountered. His sketchbooks were true diaries of the local flora and fauna, with detailed notes on each discovery he made. That day, however, something compelled him to go a little further than his usual territory. The sound of the creek grew louder as he ventured deeper into the forest, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of bromeliads growing on the ancient trees. That's when he heard it. A different sound, something between a groan and a low growl, almost imperceptible. Michael stopped, his heart beating faster. Years of living in the forest had taught him to recognize the sounds of local animals, but this one was completely new. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, he began to approach the source of the sound, stepping carefully on the dry leaves to avoid making noise. The sound became clearer with each step, and soon Michael realized it was coming from a denser area of the forest, where the trees formed a kind of natural curtain. Carefully pushing aside some branches, his eyes widened at the sight before him. There, caught in a rudimentary trap, was an adult tiger. The animal had one of its paws trapped and, though injured, maintained an impressive dignity. Its amber eyes met Michael's, and at that moment something inexplicable happened. There wasn't just fear in the tiger's eyes. There was also a deep, almost human intelligence. Michael felt his legs tremble but couldn't move away. The animal showed no aggression, merely observing the boy with cautious curiosity. Michael knew he should run, get help, do anything but stand there. But something in the tiger's eyes kept him rooted to the spot. It was as if his entire life in the forest, all his drawings and observations, had been just preparation for this moment. With his heart pounding, he took out his sketchbook and began to draw quickly. His strokes captured not only the majestic form of the animal, but also that penetrating gaze that seemed to pierce his soul. As he drew, his mind worked frantically, trying to understand how a tiger could be there, so far from its natural habitat. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon when Michael finally put away his sketchbook. He knew he had to make a decision. He couldn't let the animal suffer, but he also couldn't simply free it without considering the consequences. He looked once more at the tiger, which kept its eyes fixed on him as if understanding his dilemma. "I'm going to help you," Michael whispered, more to himself than to the animal, "but I need to do it right." That night, lying in his bed, Michael couldn't sleep. The image of the tiger wouldn't leave his mind, and he knew his life had changed forever that afternoon. Tomorrow would be a new day, and he needed a plan to help that majestic creature without endangering his own safety or that of the residents of Green Hills. What Michael didn't yet know was that this encounter would be just the beginning of an adventure that would transform not only his life, but that of the entire Green Hills community. Destiny had chosen an unlikely pair, a dreamer boy and a mysterious tiger, to tell a story of courage, compassion, and the true meaning of protecting what we love. Sunday dawned cloudy in Green Hills, and Michael had barely slept. Throughout the night, he researched in his books about feline behavior and first aid for wild animals. On the town's slow internet, he searched for information about captive tigers in the United States, but nothing explained the presence of that majestic animal in the region. Before the sun fully rose, he prepared his backpack more carefully than ever. In addition to the basic survival kit his father had taught him to carry, he included a thermos bottle with clean water, bandages from the home first aid kit, and raw meat wrapped in banana leaves, an idea he had after recalling stories his grandfather used to tell about helping wild animals. "I'm going to spend the day studying at Peter's house," he lied to his parents for the first time in his life, feeling a pang of guilt. Anna frowned, noticing something different in her son's tone, but Robert intervened before she could question him. "Let the boy be, Anna. It's good he has friends his age." Michael followed the trail with determined steps, though his heart beat fast. The path seemed different under the diffuse light of the cloudy morning, as if the forest itself held deeper secrets. As he approached the spot where he had found the tiger, he slowed down and sharpened his senses, as he had learned in his previous explorations. The animal was still there, but something had changed. Its gaze, once cautious, now showed almost immediate recognition upon seeing Michael. The boy stopped at a safe distance, observing the situation more clearly. The trap was an old device, probably abandoned years ago by hunters who no longer frequented the area. "Hi, friend," Michael whispered, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "I brought some things for you." With slow and deliberate movements, he took the meat from his backpack and placed it on the ground, gently pushing it towards the tiger with a long stick. The animal observed the food, but kept its focus on Michael, as if more interested in his intentions than the meal. While the tiger finally occupied itself with the food, Michael studied the trap more closely. It was a simple mechanism, but he would need tools to open it without further injuring the animal. He took out his sketchbook and began to make a detailed diagram of the device, planning how he could dismantle it. It was then that he noticed something shining on the tiger's neck, a metallic collar partially hidden by its dense fur. On it, a strange symbol glimmered even in the dim light. It looked like a crescent moon intertwined with a tree, something Michael had never seen before. The boy spent the following hours alternating between making notes, offering water to the tiger, and trying to gain its trust. He spoke softly, telling stories about his life in Green Hills, his drawings, his discoveries in the forest. The animal seemed to listen with almost human attention, its amber eyes fixed on the boy. "You're not an ordinary tiger, are you?" Michael murmured, more to himself than to the animal. "You must have quite a story to tell." In the middle of the afternoon, a light drizzle began to fall. Michael improvised a cover with large banana leaves to protect the tiger, which watched his every move with interest. When the rain intensified, the boy was forced to leave, promising to return the next day. On the way home, his mind buzzed with plans and questions. The collar was proof that the tiger had a specific origin, perhaps in some sanctuary or preservation center. But why were there no news reports about the disappearance of such an important animal? And why did the symbol seem vaguely familiar? That night, while flipping through his old sketchbooks, Michael found something that made his heart race. In a sketch from 3 years ago, he had drawn the same symbol from the tiger's collar. It was on an old faded sign he had found during one of his explorations, but at the time, he hadn't given much importance to the find. The discovery left him restless. There were more mysteries in that forest than he had imagined, and now he was determined to unravel them. It was no longer just about helping an injured animal. It was about discovering a story the forest had kept hidden for years, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Before sleeping, Michael made a list of everything he would need for his rescue mission the next day. He knew he was getting involved in something bigger than he could imagine, but he also felt he had no choice. That mysterious tiger had awakened something inside him, a courage he didn't know he possessed. The crescent moon shone in the night sky, curiously similar to the symbol on the tiger's collar, as if the universe itself conspired to unite the destinies of that unlikely pair of friends. In Green Hills, a new story began to unfold, silent as the night but powerful as nature itself. On Monday, Michael went to school with his head in the clouds. During history class, while Ms. Beatrice talked about the colonization of upstate New York, he discreetly sketched the symbol from the tiger's collar in his notebook, trying to decipher its meaning. It was then that she mentioned something that completely captured his attention. In the 1940s, several international scientific expeditions visited our region, explained Ms. Beatrice, adjusting her glasses. Some of them established research centers, that operated for decades, studying our fauna and flora. Michael raised his hand so quickly that he knocked over his pencil case. "Miss Beatrice, is there any record of these research centers?" "What sudden interest, Michael?" Miss Beatrice smiled, pleased. "There are some old documents in the town library. We even have photos of a center that operated near Green Hills, the Luna Silvestre Institute." Michael's heart raced at hearing the name. Luna. Moon in Spanish. Could it be a coincidence? As soon as the bell rang for recess, he ran to the library. The librarian, Ms. Carmen, an elderly lady with grey hair who always encouraged his love for books, helped him locate a dusty file on local history. "Here, Michael," she said, placing an old album on the table. "These photos are from the inauguration of the Institute in 1943. The yellowed pages revealed black and white images of a complex of buildings amidst the forest. In one of the photos, above the main gate, was the same symbol Michael had seen on the tiger's collar, the crescent moon intertwined with a tree. The Institute was famous for its work with big cats," explained Ms. Carmen, adjusting her reading glasses. "They say they developed revolutionary research on animal behavior, but it mysteriously closed in the 90s before you were born." Michael photographed some pages with his cell phone and spent the rest of the day eager to return to the forest. After school, he met his best friend, Julia, a girl with colorful braids and a keen eye who shared his love for nature. "Michael, you're different," she observed, walking beside him. "There's something going on that you're not telling me." He hesitated. Julia had always been his confidant in his forest discoveries, but this time the secret seemed too big. However, seeing the sincere concern on his friend's face, he decided to trust her. "I need to show you something," he whispered, "but you have to promise to keep it absolutely secret." Julia listened attentively as Michael recounted the events of the past few days. Her eyes widened at the mention of the tiger, but she didn't interrupt. When he finished, she was silent for a few seconds. "I'm going with you," she finally declared. "You can't do this alone, it's too dangerous." "But Julia—" "No buts," she cut him off. "Besides, my Uncle Fernando is a vet. I can get some medications and supplies from his clinic without raising suspicion." Michael felt immense relief, not just for having help, but for sharing the weight of that extraordinary secret. Together, they devised a plan to visit the tiger after school, with Julia telling her parents she was working on a science project with Michael. When they reached the clearing, the tiger lifted its head, alert. To Michael's surprise, the animal remained calm even with Julia's presence. She, in turn, was amazed by the creature's majesty. "It's incredible," she whispered, observing the collar. "Look, there's something engraved besides the symbol." With a small flashlight, they illuminated the back of the medal. There was a worn inscription, "Guardians Project, Number 7, 1989. "Guardians?" Michael frowned. "What project would that be?" "It must be related to the Luna Silvestre Institute," replied Julia, already photographing the inscription with her cell phone. "We can research more about it." As they talked in low voices, they began to treat the tiger's injured paw with the medications Julia had brought. The animal remained surprisingly cooperative, as if understanding they were there to help. "Miguel, look!" Julia pointed to something shiny among the leaves a few meters away. It was another medal, very similar to the tiger's, but covered in mud and partially oxidized. The discovery of this second medal opened a new chapter in the mystery. It wasn't just a lost tiger. There was a bigger story unfolding, one that began decades ago with a mysterious institute and a project called Guardians. As night fell, while they returned home, Miguel and Julia made a pact. They would uncover the truth about the Luna Silvestre Institute, the Guardians Project, and most importantly, find a way to protect that extraordinary tiger that fate had placed in their path. The next morning, Miguel and Julia arrived at school earlier, determined to use every free minute for their investigation. In the library, Ms. Carmen helped them find more old documents about the region. Among yellowed newspaper clippings and faded photographs, they discovered something intriguing: a 1989 report on the Luna Silvestre Institute. "Revolutionary Preservation Program trains animals to protect conservation areas," read the headline. The photo showed scientists alongside various big cats, each wearing a collar similar to the one the tiger they had found. "Look at this," whispered Julia, pointing to a name in the report. Dr. Helen Sanders, coordinator of the Guardians Project, and she still lives in Green Hills. Miguel felt a chill. Helen Sanders was the mysterious old lady who lived in an ancient house on the outskirts of town, known for her vast botanical garden and for rarely receiving visitors. The town's children often made up stories about her, but Miguel had never paid attention to those rumors. During recess, they devised a plan. They needed to talk to Helen Sanders, but they couldn't just knock on her door and tell her about the tiger. They decided to gather more information first. After school, they went to Julia's uncle's veterinary clinic with the excuse of doing a project on wild animals. While Fernando attended a client, they discreetly searched through the clinic's old files. "I found it," exclaimed Julia softly, pulling out a dusty folder. Records of treatments from the Luna Silvestre Institute. The documents revealed that Julia's uncle wasn't the first veterinarian in the family. His grandfather had worked with the institute, treating the animals of the Guardians Project. In the notes, they found references to a revolutionary training system that allowed big cats to act as natural guardians of conservation areas. "That explains why the tiger didn't attack us," reflected Miguel. "He was trained to protect the forest, not to be aggressive towards humans." That afternoon, when they visited the tiger, they observed its behavior with new eyes. The animal seemed more than just tame. There was a trained intelligence in its actions, an almost human awareness of its role in the forest. Julia treated the injured paw again, which was beginning to show signs of improvement. Meanwhile, Miguel explored the surroundings more carefully, looking for other clues about the old institute. "Miguel, come see this," Julia called suddenly. The tiger had moved in a specific way, revealing something under the dry leaves, a partially buried metal plate. After carefully cleaning the plate, they discovered it was an old sign from the institute. Besides the familiar symbol of the crescent moon with the tree, there were geographical coordinates engraved at the bottom. "These coordinates," said Miguel, consulting his cell phone, "point to a location not far from here, further north in the forest." They decided that on Saturday they would follow those coordinates, but first, they needed to figure out how to free the tiger from the trap. Julia had an idea while examining the mechanism. "If we get the right tools, we can open this without hurting him more. My dad has a complete workshop at home." As they planned the rescue, they heard a distant sound of breaking branches. The tiger immediately became alert, its ears moving in the direction of the sound. Miguel and Julia quickly hid behind a large tree. An elderly man passed a few meters away, carrying a professional camera. He wore a vest full of pockets and seemed to know the area well. The tiger remained absolutely still, as if it knew exactly how to camouflage itself. After the man moved away, the teenagers breathed a sigh of relief. "That was Mr. George, the town's photographer," whispered Julia. "He always roams the forest documenting wildlife." "We need to be more careful," replied Miguel. "We can't risk anyone discovering the tiger before we understand the whole story." Before leaving, Miguel left more food and water for the animal. The tiger watched them with those deep, intelligent eyes, as if understanding that they were about to uncover a bigger mystery than they imagined. On the way back home, they discussed their next steps. They needed the tools to free the tiger, to discover what was at the coordinates on the plate, and most importantly, to find a way to talk to Helen Sanders. "Tomorrow I'll bring my dad's tools," said Julia. "The longer the tiger stays trapped, the greater the risk of someone finding him." Miguel agreed, but something inside him said that freeing the tiger would be just the beginning. The discoveries of that day suggested that much more was at stake, a decades-old story that for some reason was resurfacing now. The sun set over Green Hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. In the forest, an extraordinary tiger patiently awaited, guardian of secrets that were slowly beginning to reveal themselves. And two teenagers, united by courage and curiosity, had no idea how much their lives were about to change forever. On Wednesday, the sky dawned heavy with dark clouds. Miguel woke up before the alarm, anxious about the day's plans. Julia had managed to get the necessary tools, carefully hiding them in her school backpack. But an unexpected event would completely change the course of their investigations. During science class, the principal entered the room with an announcement. Helen Sanders had offered to give a botany lecture to the 9th grade students. Miguel and Julia exchanged surprised looks. It was a unique opportunity. The elderly scientist arrived at the school after recess. Despite her advanced age, Helen Sanders had a commanding presence. Her white hair was tied in an elegant bun, and her green eyes exuded deep wisdom. She wore a necklace that immediately caught Miguel's attention, a small crescent moon made of silver. During the lecture about medicinal plants of the region, Miguel observed every detail of the scientist's behavior. When she mentioned the importance of ecological balance, her eyes sparkled in a special way, as if she held greater knowledge than she revealed. At the end of the presentation, while the other students left, Miguel gathered the courage to approach. "Dr. Sanders, I'm very interested in research on environmental preservation. Could you tell me about your previous work?" Helen studied him with a penetrating gaze. "What kind of research interests you specifically, young man?" "Actually," Julia intervened, joining them, "we found some references to the Luna Silvestre Institute and got curious." A flash of recognition crossed Helen's face. She looked around, ensuring they were alone. "You two come have tea with me on Saturday," she said in a low voice. "Maybe I can answer some of your questions." On the way to the forest after school, Miguel and Julia could barely contain their excitement. Carrying the tools, they reached the tiger, which seemed more agitated than usual. "Something's different," observed Julia, while examining the animal's paw. "He's restless." Miguel noticed that the tiger constantly looked towards a specific direction in the forest. Following its gaze, he saw an almost imperceptible trail among the trees. "I think he wants to show us something," whispered Miguel. "But first, we need to free him." They worked methodically with the tools, following the plan they had devised. The tiger remained surprisingly calm throughout the process. After nearly an hour of careful work, they finally managed to dismantle the trap. The animal stood up slowly, testing its injured paw. Then, to the teenager's astonishment, it didn't run away. Instead, it took a few steps towards the trail that had caught its attention, turning to look at them as if inviting them to follow. "He wants us to go with him," said Miguel, hardly believing what was happening. With a mix of fear and fascination, they followed the tiger for about 15 minutes until they reached a clearing partially hidden by dense foliage. There, they found something that made their hearts race: ruins of old buildings, partially overtaken by vegetation. "These are the coordinates from the plate," exclaimed Julia, consulting her cell phone. "It must be one of the Institute's outposts." While exploring the ruins, the tiger stayed close, as if standing guard. Among the debris, they found abandoned scientific equipment and, more significantly, a partially preserved metal file cabinet. Inside it, they discovered folders with documents about the Guardians project. Some pages were damaged by moisture, but it was still possible to read important excerpts about a revolutionary environmental preservation program that used specially trained animals. "Look at this," said Miguel, showing an old photo. In it, a much younger Helen Sanders appeared alongside several scientists and some big cats, all wearing similar collars. A distant thunder warned them of the approaching storm. They needed to return, but couldn't leave those discoveries behind. They placed the most important documents in their waterproof backpacks. The tiger accompanied them to the edge of the forest, maintaining a respectful distance. Before parting, the animal looked at them longingly, as if wanting to ensure they would return. "Now I understand why Helen Sanders wanted to meet us," said Julia, as they ran back home under the first raindrops. "She must have realized we were close to uncovering something important." Miguel agreed, his mind buzzing with possibilities. The meeting with Helen Sanders on Saturday promised to reveal even more secrets about the Luna Silvestre Institute and the mysterious Guardians project. The storm finally broke over Green Hills, but not even the heavy rain could extinguish the adventurous spirit in the eyes of the two friends. They had freed the tiger, and in doing so, opened the doors to an even greater mystery, one that only Helen Sanders could help them unravel. Saturday dawned with a soft mist covering Green Hills. Miguel and Julia met early, carrying the documents they had discovered in the ruins in their backpacks. Helen Sanders' house was at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by a lush garden that seemed more like an extension of the forest itself. When they rang the doorbell, they were greeted by a serene-looking elderly woman, wearing a spotless white lab coat over casual clothes. "Come in," said Helen with an enigmatic smile. "The tea is ready." The living room was a fascinating mix of laboratory and library. On the walls, old maps of the region alternated with black and white photographs of the Luna Silvestre Institute. On a massive wooden table, Modern scientific equipment shared space with dusty books. "So you found him, didn't you?" Helen asked directly while serving tea in porcelain cups. "The last guardian?" Miguel and Julia exchanged surprised looks. "How did you—" "Your eyes," Helen interrupted softly. "They have the same sparkle I saw in so many others who shared our secret. Besides, I've been monitoring the region for years, waiting for this moment." She stood up and walked to a shelf, from which she took a carved wooden box with the crescent moon symbol. Inside were documents, photographs, and a necklace identical to the tigers. "The Guardians Project wasn't just a preservation program," explained Helen, her voice filled with emotion. "It was an attempt to create a deep connection between humans and animals to protect our forests. We developed a revolutionary training method that respected the wild nature of the animals while establishing a unique bond with their human guardians." The photographs showed various animals, not just big cats but also wolves, eagles, and even a jaguar, all wearing similar collars. In each image, the animals appeared next to researchers who observed them with evident admiration. "The tiger you found," Helen continued, "was our most special case. Number 7, as engraved on his collar, demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for understanding and adaptation. He not only learned to protect the forest, but also to identify people who shared the same purpose." "That's why he chose us," murmured Miguel, remembering their first encounter. Helen nodded. "When the Institute was forced to close in 1990 due to political and economic pressures, most of the animals were transferred to sanctuaries, but Number 7 escaped during transport. Some believed he had gotten lost, but I always knew he chose to stay to protect the forest." Julia took the documents they had found in the ruins out of her backpack. "We found these yesterday. The tiger led us there." Helen's eyes sparkled as she examined the papers. "These are the last pieces of the puzzle I've kept for so long. The outpost contained crucial information about our work." She then revealed something even more surprising, a detailed map of the region, marked with specific points. "These are the sacred sites of the forest, springs, ecological corridors, and breeding areas for endangered species. Number 7 knows each one of them, and his presence has kept hunters and explorers away for all these years. But now he needs our help," said Miguel, explaining about the trap and how they had freed the tiger. Helen listened attentively, her face alternating between concern and relief. "You did exactly what he expected. Now we need to ensure his work continues. The forest is once again threatened. There are plans for urban expansion that could destroy vital areas." "How can we help?" asked Julia, leaning forward eagerly. Helen smiled, a determined gleam in her eyes. The Guardians Project never really ended. It just waited for the right moment and the right people to resurface. "You two have been chosen, just as I was many years ago." She opened a drawer and took out 2 new necklaces similar to the tigers, but smaller. "These are for you. They are not just symbols, they are part of a commitment to the preservation of wildlife." Miguel and Julia took the necklaces with reverence, feeling the weight of the responsibility they had just assumed. The morning sun streaming through the windows of the house made the crescent moon symbols shine like fallen stars. "Now," said Helen, standing up with renewed energy, "let's begin your training. There's much to learn, and the forest needs its new guardians." The mist outside began to dissipate, revealing a clear and promising day. In the forest, an extraordinary tiger continued its silent vigil, knowing it was no longer alone in its sacred mission to protect that precious piece of the natural world. The following weeks completely transformed Miguel and Julia's lives. Every afternoon after school, they met with Helen in her improvised laboratory, where they learned about biology, animal behavior, and ancient tracking techniques. Weekends were dedicated to expeditions through the forest, always guided by Number 7, who seemed increasingly connected to the young guardians. "The language of the forest is subtle," explained Helen, as they walked along trails not marked on any map. "Every broken branch, every mark on the ground tells a story. Number 7 knows all of them." The tiger had fully recovered from the paw injury and now moved with impressive grace through the forest, always a few meters ahead of the group, occasionally stopping to check if the humans were following. His behavior revealed an extraordinary intelligence, a result of the special training of the Guardians Project. During one of these expeditions, they made an alarming discovery. In a remote area of the forest, they found markings on trees, and colored stakes on the ground, clear signs of a future real estate development. "It's worse than I imagined," murmured Helen, examining the topographic markers. "They intend to build a luxury condominium right in the middle of the ecological corridor." Miguel consulted the map Helen had shared. "This area is crucial for several species. The animals use it to move between different parts of the forest." "We need to act," declared Julia, her guardian necklace shining under the light filtered through the tree canopies. "But how?" Helen smiled mysteriously. "The Guardians Project wasn't just about training animals. We created a network of environmental protection that still exists. I have contacts in universities and NGOs who can help us." In the days that followed, Helen activated her old network of contacts, while Miguel and Julia began meticulous documentation work. Using their complementary skills, Miguel's detailed drawings and Julia's photographic talent, they created an impressive record of the local biodiversity. The tiger, as if understanding the importance of the mission, began to lead them to increasingly special places in the forest. He showed them nests of rare birds, a colony of endangered orchids, and even a family of golden lion tamarins that no one knew existed in the region. "Look at this," said Helen, examining the photographs and drawings. "He's showing us exactly what we need to protect this place." One day, while organizing the material in Helen's laboratory, they heard urgent knocks on the door. It was Mr. George, the town photographer, panting and agitated. "Miss Sanders," he said, "you need to see this." He showed his camera with recent photos, construction machines approaching the edge of the forest. "They've moved up the start of the works," Helen frowned. "We need to accelerate our plan." Miguel felt his guardian necklace warm slightly against his chest, a phenomenon Helen had explained as a manifestation of the special connection the ancient scientists at the Institute had managed to create between the necklaces and the forest's vital energy. "Number 7 must have noticed too," said Julia, touching her own necklace. "He's been more agitated in recent days." Helen walked to her shelf and took out an old folder. "It's time to reveal our trump card. The Luna Silvestri Institute wasn't just a research center. It was a site designated as a historical and scientific heritage. The documentation is here. It was never revoked." The young guardian's eyes sparkled with understanding. With the status of historical heritage, any construction in the area would need to go through a rigorous approval process. "But we need to prove that the area still has exceptional scientific value," added Helen. "And that's exactly what you two, with Number 7's help, have documented." That night, while finalizing the organization of the evidence, they heard a distant roar coming from the forest. It wasn't a sound of threat, but a call. The tiger was gathering other animals, as if he knew the decisive moment was approaching. "Tomorrow," said Helen, her voice filled with determination, "we will present everything to the authorities. The Guardians Project will finally fulfill its greater purpose." Miguel and Julia exchanged confident looks, their guardian necklaces glowing in unison. The forest had chosen its new protectors well, and they were ready to honor that choice. The battle for preservation was just beginning, but now they had something their adversaries did not possess: the ancient wisdom of the Luna Silvestre Institute, Helen's experience, and the extraordinary partnership with a tiger who had dedicated his life to protecting that natural sanctuary. The sun set over green hills, painting the sky with shades of gold and purple. In the forest, Number 7 continued his ancestral vigil, knowing he was no longer the only guardian of that sacred territory. A new generation had awakened, and with it, the hope of a future where humans and animals could coexist in harmony. The next morning dawned with a palpable energy in the air. Miguel, Julia, and Helen gathered early, reviewing one last time all the documents, photos, and evidence they had collected. The plan was to present the case to the local authorities and the press simultaneously, creating an impact that couldn't be ignored. "Remember," said Helen, adjusting the guardian necklace around her neck, "our strength lies in the truth and the connection we have with the forest. Number 7 and all the animals are counting on us." As they headed to the town hall, they noticed something unusual. Several forest animals seemed to have approached the town's limits. Rare birds perched on urban trees, small mammals watched curiously from bushes, and even some colorful butterflies danced in the air in unusual numbers. "It's like the forest itself is manifesting," whispered Julia in awe. At the town hall, they found not only the local authorities, but also representatives from the state and federal governments, alerted by Helen's contacts. The meeting room was packed, with local journalists and even a team from a major national network. Helen took the lead, her presence immediately commanding attention. She began by telling the story of the Luna Silvestre Institute, revealing documents that proved its status as a historical and scientific heritage site. Miguel and Julia then presented their findings, showing images and data that proved the unique ecological richness of the threatened area. "What you are about to see," announced Helen, "is the result of decades of research and a unique connection between humans and nature." At that moment, to the astonishment of everyone present, Number 7 appeared at the window of the meeting room, majestic and calm. Cameras fired frantically as the tiger observed the scene with his intelligent amber eyes. "This is the last guardian of the original project," explained Helen, her voice choked with emotion. "He has protected our forest for years, and now he shows us the way to continue his work." The tiger's presence, combined with the evidence presented, created an undeniable impact. The authorities, initially skeptical, now listened with renewed attention. The representative from the Ministry of the Environment, visibly impressed, took the floor. "What we see here today is extraordinary, not only for the ecological richness presented, but for the unique partnership between science, community, and nature. I declare that we will immediately begin the process to expand the environmental protection area, including the entire territory of the former Luna Silvestre Institute." The room erupted in applause. Miguel and Julia hugged, their guardian necklaces glowing intensely. Helen smiled, tears of joy in her eyes. In the days that followed, Green Hills became the center of attention. Researchers from all over the country arrived to study the unique phenomenon of cooperation between humans and animals. The condominium project was officially cancelled, and in its place, the creation of a research and environmental education center was proposed. Miguel and Julia, now recognized as the young guardians of the forest, became symbols of a new generation committed to environmental preservation. Their stories inspired other young people across the United States to engage in conservation projects. Number 7, while maintaining his wild nature, became an almost mythical presence in the region. Occasionally, he was seen at the forest's edges, as if checking on the progress of his human protectors. Months later, in an emotional ceremony, the new Luna Silvestre Research and Environmental Education Center was inaugurated. Helen, Miguel, and Julia cut the ribbon together, their guardian necklaces shining under the morning sun. "This is just the beginning," said Helen, looking proudly at her young apprentices. "The legacy of the Guardians Project will live on through you and all those who join us in protecting our natural home." As the ceremony continued, a soft roar echoed from the forest. Miguel and Julia smiled, knowing Number 7 was there, celebrating in his own way. Night fell over Green Hills, but the forest was more alive than ever. Soft lights illuminated the educational trails of the new center, where visitors could learn about the rich local biodiversity. In the heart of the woods, Number 7 rested in his favorite clearing, his amber eyes reflecting the stars. Miguel and Julia, sitting on the porch of the research center, watched the forest with a mix of admiration and responsibility. Their guardian necklaces glowed softly, a constant reminder of the commitment they had taken on. "You know," said Miguel, breaking the contemplative silence, "when we found Number 7 in that trap, I never imagined our lives would change so much." Julia smiled, touching her necklace. "It's like the forest chose us. And now, we have the chance to give back." Helen joined them, bringing a tray with herbal tea from the forest. "What you did was awaken something that was always here," she said, her eyes shining with wisdom. "The connection between humans and nature. That's what the Guardians Project always sought." As they sipped their tea, they planned for the future. There would be more research, more young people to train, more areas to protect. The legacy of the Luna Silvestre Institute was alive and growing. In the forest, other animals joined Number 7 in his silent vigil. The fight for preservation was far from over, but now there was hope. A new generation of guardians had emerged, ready to face the challenges ahead. And so, under the starry sky of Green Hills, the story of the tiger and his young guardians became not an end, but a new beginning. A beginning of harmony between man and nature, of respect for ancient wisdom and hope for the future. The forest, in its silent majesty, continued to pulse with life, its secrets now protected by those who had learned to hear its call.